Excellent. Okay, we are recording. Thank you all so much for being here today. Again, I'm Katie Hayden, planner with the Critical Area Commission. We're excited to have you all here. Thank you so much for just introducing yourselves and saying where you're from. And with our welcome and introductions done, we're going to move on to our next agenda item. I would like to welcome Kate Charbonneau, and Executive Director for Critical Area Commission, and Lisa Hoger, the Legislative and Regulations Coordinator for Critical Area Commission, to share some of our bill updates.
All right, Eric, I will pass it on over to you first.
I'm going to steal the show just for a second. A little unprogrammed action here this morning. But yeah, I just wanted to pop on for 2 minutes at the beginning of this agenda item to say a couple of things about the legislation. We're thrilled that both of those bills did pass, and I'm very pleased that they passed with amendments that were worked out with many of you all and submitted through the Maryland Association of Counties. You know, we started this with the goal to ensure that the work we do has the tools to take on the challenges that we're facing today and that are growing, namely adapting to climate change and dealing with some longstanding issues around equity. While we were doing that, we also had the goal to try and start simplifying areas of the program that we know are pain points, that we know repeatedly come up as frustrations in many jurisdictions. I hope we've done that. I believe that we have made progress on all three of those fronts. This legislation certainly does not tell us how to do our jobs, and I'm glad it doesn't, but it does give us the authorities, the mandate, frankly, and the charge to go at some of these issues. We certainly intend to go at them the same way we've intended to go at everything in the critical area program over the last 40 years, and that is in partnership with our local jurisdictions. So I'm really glad that we did that extended introduction this morning, because the truth is that it's not just Kate and Lisa and me and the other folks you see on the CAC staff. The critical area program is everybody on this call, and many who are not. And that is how we intend to work this legislation out over the coming years. We have years to do it. We're going to need all of that time. But your local programs really are where the rubber meets the road on all of this stuff. You are on the front lines. We are here to be a service to you. We're here, of course, to fulfill our role in ensuring consistency and providing technical assistance. But with that, really pleased to be where we are, to be with who we are with, and that is you all. And I'm going to pass it over to Kate and Lisa to start working through the legislation that passed earlier this month. Thank you, Kate.
Thanks, Eric, very much. Lisa, are you able to hop on the screen and show the presentation?
Working on it.
Okay.
Let me know if it works.
Oh, it did. There it is. Okay. Thank you all. I'm just going to do a very quick introduction and go over Senate Bill 268, and then Lisa's going to cover the big bill, and then at the end we're just going to cover some ways we're gearing up to assist you all with, you know, what comes next. So we had two bills, and we went over these earlier this year. Senate Bill 306 and House Bill 233 is, you know, the big bill, which Lisa will cover. And then Senate Bill 268 was the enforcement updates. Next slide, Lisa. Is it switching? There we go. Okay. So SB 268 just really made some updates to the enforcement provisions of our law that don't require you at this point to do any modifications on your existing procedures and processes. So first, it clarified the penalty provisions. So there's a references previously to administrative or civil and sometimes criminal, and they weren't used consistently throughout. And so the technical change was just to not use those words. So whatever procedures you use locally, whether it's civil or administrative, you wouldn't be tripped up on continuing to use those procedures. So the first part just really, it requires no change or on your end in terms of what does it mean for you. It does eliminate the chair's 30-day waiting period. So if there is a violation that has occurred locally and in coordination with finding out from you about that violation, we determined that the local jurisdiction has not taken action. The chair previously had to wait 30 days after notifying you all regarding a referral to the Office of the Attorney General. At this stage, he does not have to wait those 30 days. Again, this is a provision our preference is to work with you all, support you all on your local enforcement efforts. We obviously can still continue if you request our assistance to provide that assistance. So we simply see this as a very last resort type of measure, for sticky wickets, kind of large, significant violation cases. And then finally, it just clarified the types of enforcement when the Attorney General can take an enforcement action. So previously, there were provisions that limited that to approved plans. And we also often know violations aren't necessarily limited to approved plans. And so this opens it up a little bit more so that the Office of the Attorney General can better assist us when needed. So those are the three big parts of SB 268. Again, there's really no change that needs to be made locally to your current procedures or provisions. And next slide, Lisa. I think it pops it over to you.
No.
Here we go. Yeah, so I covered these things. Sorry, I skipped ahead. Again, we're not taking any new authority. There's no expansion of authority. But we would, if there are egregious violations, we do want to be able to act faster, and now we're going to be able to do that if needed. So next slide.
Okay, good morning, everyone. I'm going to talk about what we considered the big bill. So Kate talked about what we called the baby bill during session because it was maybe 3 pages, and this one was considerably longer. Many of you on the call today were part of a discussion we had that was arranged by MACo and MML with Dom Ruchko and Angelica. And you all gave us some really good questions and feedback at that time, and we truly appreciated that discussion that we had a couple months ago. It was very helpful and informative, and we actually made a few corrections or changes to the bill. So thank you again for those of you that participated and helped us with that. So the big bill, Senate Bill 306 and House Bill 233 did the 3 things that you see on your screen. New to the critical area law, now it's enshrined in both our findings and we've added to the goals of the law. So you all remember the goals, right? You've been doing this a while. Water quality, habitat, and accommodating development. And now we have 2 more goals, which include coastal resiliency planning and equity and environmental justice. So those are, and I'm going to talk about more of those in a minute in more detail. And the final thing that went into this big bill was some administrative changes, which both are helpful to the commission staff and are also, we hope, going to be more tools in your toolbox locally when you're looking at development projects. So I'm going to start with the administrative provisions first. The first big thing that happened in this bill had to do with comprehensive reviews, which is everybody's favorite topic, I know. You're all familiar with the intervals from which comprehensive reviews should occur. So the law currently states that every 6 years there should be a comprehensive update. We have extended that time frame to 10 years because between your experiences and our experiences, we realize that 6 years is probably too soon, and that you all need some more time in between the intervals from which they occur. What the bill also does is it requires essentially that whatever your due date is, and we're going to work with you all individually on that, that you get it completed within 3 years of that date. So there'll be a 1-year time frame, and then if you're not done within a year, then the commission can extend that to another 2 to 3 years. So you'll have 3 years to get it done. And then the other thing that we hope will be helpful to you all is allowing that when you're doing your comprehensive updates, you can also do comprehensive map updates. So you can look at your critical area zones and decide if there needs to be some changes, which would be outside of the typical growth allocation process, unless you're upzoning something from, say, like an RCA to an LDA or IDA or LDA to IDA. And we can talk about that more in detail, and we will be giving you more information about that. We've had 2 jurisdictions that have gone through that process. One was Talbot County a few years ago, and I can't remember, is it Kent County that's doing it now? You guys can shout out if I'm wrong. But it's something that we thought would be something that would be helpful, and we put it in the bill. Some more administrative provisions have to do with helping us to help you all. And that is required tracking and reporting of your fee in lieu funds. And that just doesn't mean your buffer funds, but also if you collect funds for stormwater, or if you collect forest fee in lieu that is separate from your buffer funds. So the reason we want to do that is we want to see what you've got. And because we're moving forward now into the future with climate resiliency and environmental justice and equity provisions that are going to be going into local programs, we're going to try and see how we can use those funds maybe in more creative and adaptive ways than what we've done in the past with you all. So that's one thing that we've put in the bill. The other thing is we're clarifying the accessory dwelling unit provisions in the resource conservation area. I think most of you have opted in to allowing accessory dwelling units in the RCA. And what we're doing there is we're trying to provide a little bit more flexibility with how much lot coverage can be allotted to an ADU when it's part of the structure that already, the primary dwelling unit that exists on the property. We're also putting in some flexibility for lot coverage, which is another favorite of everyone. You may recall that in the current law, and I keep saying current law because even though the bills have passed, the law doesn't change until October 1st of this year. So that's why I'm saying current law. And it talks about decks with gaps. Everybody knows about that. We've taken out that language. We've eliminated it so that we can give you all and us more flexibility and figure out what to do with decks and how to manage that. And so that's another thing that we're hoping will help you all as a tool. And one of the things that we've did for our clarification and for yours is we've clarified how mapping mistakes are managed, because we've had court case that specified how that's done, and we wanted to make it clear in the law. So I'm going to switch over now to the coastal resiliency provisions. This is a slide with 3 bullets, but it's bigger than 3 bullets. I won't be able to cover it all today because we don't have the time that it requires. But we will be reaching out to you all over the next couple months with more guidance and information regarding all of these issues. So it's clearer and you know how it's going to work. These things are not happening overnight. So don't panic. It's not going to, like, once October 1st comes, you know, all the lights turn on and we have to start doing these things. These are going to take time. We plan to meet with you all individually, particularly when we're working on your comprehensive reviews, because we recognize that coastal resiliency, say on the lower shore counties, is going to have a different meaning than it might in the upper shore or midshore. So these are things that we'll be working on over time. So one of the things that we did is it's going to require local governments and the commission to incorporate certain types of considerations for coastal resilience into local programs. And that could mean many things. There's different tools that the planners use to do coastal resilience planning. I've been working with my federal partners who are doing it up at Aberdeen Proving Ground and some of the other federal installations around the Bay. Just sat in on a meeting yesterday, saw a lot of good information and examples, but we're also going to be working with our state partners as well. We also put in the bill that when a growth allocation is being proposed, that those climate resiliency considerations be used when locating new areas for growth allocation. So once they're defined, that'll help us figure out where's the best place to put a new LDA or IDA on the landscape. And then also the coastal resiliency provisions provide new opportunities for TDR programs. Now, this doesn't mean that we're overtaking any existing TDR programs that you may have already. It doesn't mean you have to create one. It's an opt-in provision, but it's another tool that we think could be extremely useful in addressing vulnerable areas. So you could have a property where there's vulnerable areas and they can use those vulnerable areas as sending areas to places elsewhere in your jurisdiction. Maybe it's in your growth plan that would be more appropriate for development. Again, there's a lot more to the coastal resiliency requirements, but that's kind of your general summary of what's there. And then moving into the environmental justice and equity provisions. Again, this is going to factor into the growth allocation. So if there's a growth allocation, one of the factors, as you all may recall, you have to meet certain standards like locational standards, and then there's factors to consider. Environmental justice has been added as one of those factors to consider with a growth allocation. There's also provisions in the bill that would require more inclusive public participation, which when we met with many of you back in the fall, we heard a lot of that happening already. So some of these things are processes that you all already have in place, but we wanted to have it in our state law as well. And then it's going to require that environmental justice be incorporated into local programs as an element of your local program, just as coastal resiliency will. Again, the lights aren't turning on immediately, but we're going to be working with you all as time moves forward on how to do these things with your local programs. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Kate.
Okay, thank you. So we just wanted to finish up with a quick preview of how we'll be coordinating and working with you and the type of assistance we're trying to set up so that we can provide you all to do all these fun new things. So as Lisa mentioned, for sure, this is not going to, change your world overnight. But it is important that we all together make a concerted effort on doing the comprehensive program updates. The bill established a deadline of fiscal year 28 for when that 10-year deadline can take effect. So anyone who has not updated by then, there's a process with some grace periods for you to try and continue to do your updates before then we can enforce that. So but our goal is to provide the tools and the resources that you need to get that comprehensive review done. And so part of that is going to be sort of repurposing some of our existing local grant support to help those who are unable to do a comp review in-house. So we'll be providing more information on that. We'll also obviously continue to be updating our model ordinances. Those are available now online and you can use. There's one for counties and one for towns. The towns is a little bit more streamlined. Both really do try and point out to you where you can make very specific changes, things that are unique to your jurisdiction. So I think they're a pretty good resource and tool. Obviously, any feedback you have on those, we're happy to accept. And then, stay tuned. We're going to be trying to also provide more education opportunities and training opportunities. And then finally, part of this does involve, obviously, some mapping. And so we have an existing partnership with Eastern Shore Regional GIS Cooperative. They've been doing, as you know, the critical area map updates. And we're looking to provide some flexibility in that contract as well so that we can do small one-off projects. So if there's a local mapping need you identify as part of either the comprehensive review or as we get to developing updates related to climate or equity, we can provide those services as well. So we're really going to try and make sure we're giving you all the tools and resources you need. And we're looking forward to that partnership and working with you in the next few years. So I think that's all that we have right now, Lisa. Is that correct?
Yes, that is it.
All right. Are there any questions that you all might have at this point? Ah, that was the enforcement bill signing.
Yeah, Eric didn't make that one, but we're hoping that we can get him in the next one. No questions, no hands up. Wow.
We got one. Mark, go ahead.
Yeah, hi everybody. I just had a quick question. How would we apply for grants for the assistance for doing the local updates?
Yeah, we'll be putting out information on that in the next couple of months. So it will probably not start until FY26, but provide more information on that. Go ahead, Mark.
Yes, you may want to wait for us to read the language, but I was curious about the changes in lot coverage. Particularly, you mentioned decks, and so adding flexibility to me sort of creates complexity because I always refer to sort of the state law as the authority. So I'm just curious about that, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah. So currently, the law talks about decks not counting towards lot coverage if they have gaps through which water flows freely. And we have heard over the years that lots of questions like, what does that mean? How do you determine that? So we just replaced that phrase with the word permeable. So, you know, what does permeable mean? I understand can be also, what does that mean? But that really is for you all to define. And so, you know, if there's a policy you need to do, or if you want to add it to your ordinance of like, this is what permeable means, to qualify, you know, go ahead. You can do that internally, and so that's just the change there. On the additional lot coverage, basically, we have seen some small lot coverage variances. So somebody's at their limit or already over their limit, and there's some small change they want to make. So what you can do now is if you adopt into your program a list of materials, list of lot coverage types that you would identify as pervious, then an applicant could have up to 500 square feet additional without a variance of that specified permeable material. Because sometimes that's what we would hear is like, oh, I just want this extra thing and I'll do it in permeable pavers. Why can't I have it? And so this gets them, if they can do that in the permeable paver, you have it as part of your program, then they don't have to seek a lot coverage variance.
Okay, thank you very much.
Sure. And again, we will be providing more feedback or more guidance on all of these parts of the bill to you all in written materials, and maybe more specifically, we'll break down each in sort of presentations. But this was sort of like a quick run through of what does this all mean, and we'll continue to update you and coordinate with you on those parts.
Wonderful. Thank you so
Thanks,
much.
Katie.
Thank you, Kate, Lisa, and Eric for providing those updates on the bills. And now moving right along, I'm going to invite Nick Kelly and Charlotte Sheeran, our program chiefs at the Critical Area Commission, to explain our new commission meeting schedule and setup.
Thank you, Katie. Charlotte is pulling up the screen. What Charlotte and I want to do is just kind of briefly go through the new changes to our commission meeting schedule and process. Next slide. So what we're going to do is talk about sort of the schedule of meetings, our commission meetings, and our subcommittees. The process has changed. The dates, particularly for the subcommittees, have changed, and also the commission meeting. We're switching up the schedule a little bit. And then Charlotte's going to go through the new pre-application process, and then finally she's going to wrap up with going through an example that went through this process, I believe in the February meeting, and sort of walk through that process. Just give you an idea of how this new commission procedure is going to work. Next slide. So this is our new commission meeting schedule, and if you think it's surprising to you, it's not nearly as surprising as when I found out that I was on the cover of a magazine in Calvert County 10 years ago in the middle of eating a donut. And that to me is probably way worse than any changes to this schedule itself. We have our project subcommittees, which are now going to be 2 weeks prior to the commission meeting. So it's going to be on the Wednesday, 2 weeks prior. We had one yesterday on the 17th, which is going to be prior to our May 1st meeting. Program subcommittees are now going to be held on the Friday prior to a commission meeting. So for example, our program subcommittee is going to meet next Friday on the 26th prior to the May 1st meeting. And then finally, the big change is our full commission meeting is now moving to every 6 weeks. And one of the big reasons for these changes in terms of the commission meeting going to 6 weeks is we were noticing that we were canceling a lot of meetings when we were having them the first Wednesday of the month. And to provide some more consistency with deadlines and knowing when meeting dates are for not only for the applicants like the counties and the towns, but also for our commissioners, we felt that a 6 week period was probably a little bit more efficient with the way projects are moving. And then with the subcommittees, we've moved them away from Friday to give a little bit of leeway, not only for our staff, but for, once again, the applicants, that in case the subcommittee has any recommended changes or any questions, it gives us a little more time to sort those out instead of trying to fit it all within a 12 to 1 o'clock period on that same Wednesday. So that's to kind of give you the background. We'll be able to share these slides. The website link is below, so you'll be able to access that if you need to in the future. Next slide. So this first one, this is our full commission meeting details. This can be found on that website that I just showed you. You can see here when the meeting dates are coming up. So our next meeting date will be May 1st. Then we'll have one on June 12th. You'll also notice that out of all the ones that we're holding this year, only 3 of them are going to be in person. And we're going to now be sort of scheduling in advance when we'll be meeting in person, and then the rest will be virtual meetings. So you'll be able to go click on that link and you'll see whether you'll have to meet us online or whether you have to come to Crownsville to meet with us for the meeting. And this also includes the agenda dates for when they're going to be published, which is usually 12 days prior to the commission meeting. We put the agenda out for the full commission meeting. Next slide. This is the schedule for the project subcommittees and program subcommittees. They will all be held from 9 to noon, and they will all be held virtually. All of our subcommittees will be held virtually throughout the rest of this year. So said yesterday, April 17th, we had our virtual project subcommittee meeting. Kate Durant presented a project for Maryland Stadium Authority, and Susan presented a project for Queen Anne's County. Next Friday, we'll be having our program subcommittee. We have a couple projects on that agenda. And then on May 1st, we will be meeting virtually. And this is going to be the process from here on out. So if you've got a project coming up and you want to have a project come in for the June 12th meeting, we'll be having that subcommittee meeting on May 29th. You have a program item that's coming up for the June 12th meeting, we'll be bringing that to the subcommittee on Friday, June 7th. So that's the way the process is, and these are the deadlines. Next. In terms of the actual commission itself, we're also changing up the way that the commission will be voting on projects. And projects will be falling into 3 separate categories. Under the consent calendar, these are going to be projects that when we come to that commission meeting, So like on May 1st, if we have projects that meet this consent calendar, our staff, we will not be providing presentations. These will all be just part of a group of a list that will be voted on by the entire commission. Projects that meet the consent calendar are going to be ones that are recommended for approval by the subcommittee, and they have no changes to the conditions in the original staff report, or the staff report had no conditions in the first place. So these are projects that have gone through the subcommittee, gotten full approval, and had no questions asked. Those will go under consent. The summary report are going to have abbreviated staff presentations. We're talking maybe a 2 to 3 minute presentation, something short along those lines. Those are projects that are still recommended for approval, but there may have been some change to the conditions in the staff report or additional information requested. So, for example, if during the project subcommittee, the subcommittee added a condition for a planting plan or a buffer management plan, since there's a change to the condition, we want to have a 2 to 3 minute presentation so that the other half of the commission who's in the opposite subcommittee can hear what those changes are and why. Same if there was additional information requested, if there's something on public notice of the Board of Public Works and we were waiting for a final Public Works approval, or a subcommittee, wanted to ask additional question about maybe a planting species because of sea level rise or saltwater inundation and whether a change should be made. It's an opportunity to kind of bring those forward to show that those concerns have been addressed by the local jurisdiction. And then finally, the full presentations, which in the past we've done for all projects, will be limited to those that are projects that have either been recommended for denial or to be returned with changes to be made by the local jurisdiction. Panel reports, because panel reports don't go through subcommittees. The panel makes a recommendation that goes straight to the commission. So those are for amendments, like if you had a growth allocation amendment or a comprehensive review amendment. Work group products. So for example, commission right now, we're doing some work with DEIJ. So we'll have probably a work group product at the end that we would present to the commission. We're also working on regional mitigation banking with their state agencies. So that would be something we'd bring to the full commission for a presentation. And then if there's any other sort of items that don't appear before a subcommittee, sometimes that could be a regulatory thing that Lisa's working on, or if we have some other type of bill going through the General Assembly, that's something we'd bring to the full commission so that they're aware of it. So commission meeting day is a lot different now. We're starting our commission meetings at 1 in the afternoon. Subcommittees are on different days, and the presentations are going to be fewer. It's going to be less, and so we're not sort of repeating the same presentations in the morning again in the afternoon. Just gives a little bit more. We're hoping this is a little bit more expedited process and a little bit of a smoother process. Next slide, please. So this is just a slide. Once again, if you go to the link, you'll see the subcommittee dates and deadlines. If you were trying to make the project subcommittee May 29th agenda, we would have needed information by yesterday, and the agenda would be published on the 17th. So if you're trying to make the July 24th meeting for our August commission meeting, we would need information by June 12th, and our agenda published on July 12th. So this gives you that idea. It's still sort of a 6-week timeline. We ask for all information to be submitted 6 weeks in advance of the project subcommittee. That's the same as what we're doing now. It's just that these meetings are 2 weeks earlier than they were last year. Next slide. And for program subcommittee, it's a little bit more complicated because the statute sort of determines when projects get set on the agenda. If something is a refinement, it's when our chair makes that decision and makes that determination to be a refinement. And the statute says is when he makes that determination, it goes on the next commission agenda. So the way that these deadlines work are, if you wanted to be on the program subcommittee for March 15th, our agenda is published on March 6th, so the chair would have to make a decision prior to that date. So once again, if you're trying to get on that June commission meeting and it's a program change, a text amendment, a growth allocation, and Chair Fisher determines it's a refinement, he has to make that decision prior to May 29th. That's his deadline. If for some reason the deadline ends up on May 31st, then if he makes the call that day, then it gets bumped into that August meeting. So the deadlines are a little bit more standard here. So I would just say that, for either subcommittee, if you have something that you're trying to get to a certain agenda, just reach out to the planner in our office that you've been working with. tell them that so that they can notify Kate, they can notify Chair Fisher, and we can try to work with you to meet these deadlines, especially considering this has been sort of a new change. I'll pass it on to Charlotte for the next slide.
Thanks, Nick. Okay, so I'm going to cover the pre-application process, which is coming at you like Kate's niece practicing her karate moves. So the purpose of the pre-app process is basically to give the subcommittee the opportunity to provide preliminary feedback on a project or program change, and then give our staff and local staff time to kind of address those comments and make any necessary changes to the proposal. And so we are, excuse me, highly encouraging that projects or programs on this list come in for this pre-app process. So that would be growth allocations, any kind of significant text amendments or changes to your local program, projects requiring conditional approval, major development projects. So, you know, if there's a lot of impacts associated with the project, and then projects that might be proposing some kind of like alternative mitigation that's not something we typically would see associated with those impacts, memorandums of understanding, and then also issues related to like fee in lieu or mitigation banking. And you'll see we have an example at the end that falls in that category. So hopefully you will be as excited about the pre-application process as my niece on her Easter egg hunt. But this slide kind of lays out the steps for incorporating the pre-application process into your timeline. So the first thing you'll do is submit the pre-application form, which is on our website. That'll be submitted through Salesforce. And there's some supporting documentation that's listed on that form that should be submitted with it. And so once staff receives that pre-application submittal, we will place the project or program change on the subcommittee agenda for information only. We will give a full presentation to the subcommittee related to that project or program. The subcommittee will then provide feedback on the project or program. And then before the project or program comes in for official submittal, we will use that time to work with you, the local jurisdiction, to kind of address that feedback from the subcommittee. So once we kind of get the project or program change to a place where we're ready for official review, we will present it to the subcommittee again on the agenda for like an official vote or concurrence if the program change is a refinement. And just kind of a caveat to this process, if the program change is determined to be an amendment, it will follow a slightly different process associated with our law, our statute. And so it likely wouldn't come to a subcommittee then for an official vote or concurrence because it'll go to the panel. But anyway, so once the program change or project is officially on the subcommittee agenda for a vote, that will occur, and then it will be placed on the full commission meeting agenda for a vote. And staff will give a presentation to the full commission following those three categories that Nick outlined earlier. So the consent agenda, a summary report, or like a full presentation, depending on the recommendation from the subcommittee. So this is just a screenshot of the project subcommittee pre-application form, and also a screenshot of Nick and I looking very excited about a bill hearing we attended earlier this session. Hopefully you're a little more excited about the pre-application process than we were. But as you can see, it's really just basic information we're asking for, and then some kind of supporting documentation and information. And we also recognize that given, you know, these projects are pre-applications, some of this information may not be finalized. It may not be, available at the time of the pre-app. that's okay. Again, we just encourage you to work really closely with your critical area planner to kind of coordinate this process so that we can provide as much information as possible to the subcommittee during these, information only sessions. And this is for the form for the program subcommittee pre-application process. These are all on the website. You can use the link that Nick had in his slide to find them. But again, it's just listing out kind of basic information and then some supporting documents. So to go through a kind of example project that recently has, gone through this full pre-application process, it'll be coming to the full commission meeting on May 1st for a vote. So in February of 2024, Queen Anne's County submitted to our staff their proposal for a mitigation banking MOU. And so Susan on our staff brought that to the March 6th project subcommittee meeting as a pre-application project. So it was there for information only. The subcommittee, Susan did her full presentation. The subcommittee provided some feedback. Susan went back and worked with Queen Anne's County to kind of address some of those edits and changes were recommended by the subcommittee. And then those changes were submitted to our staff by the county in March. And Susan was able to bring that MOU to the project subcommittee yesterday for a vote. And it was voted for approval. The issues have been worked out in that interim time. And it will now be placed on the full commission meeting agenda on May 1st. So hopefully, this kind of background and the information Nick and I have provided will make you as cool as my niece hiking through the woods in her jean jacket and dinosaur boots with the pre-application process. So with that, we will ask if there are any questions.
Thank you, Charlotte and Nick. Any questions? And you can also type them in the chat as well. We got one. Stephanie, go ahead.
Yep, thanks for the presentation and all the clarification. That's always helpful. Question, in the process of growth allocation, when would we submit the pre-application? Is that something that's done like when the project comes in? Is that something that's done closer to, the end of our process, which is the, planning commission and the county commissioners? Where do you see that will occur?
I can answer that one. I would say, this, if you had some sort of, straightforward growth allocation, like I know I've seen in towns at times where it's LDA lots that are over existing lot coverage that need IDA. Those are probably things that are pretty straightforward that I don't think we have as much concern about seeing earlier in the process. But I think if it's something that might be, a good example might be something where maybe they're not applying a 300-foot setback and they're doing some alternative. I would say trying to get that in before the county does its official vote. We had a circumstance like that with Kent County that we're working on now, where they came into the subcommittee in February. We talked about some of their proposals to offset the setback, and that was prior to them getting their county commissioners vote. And what was the hope is that if there was any sort of guidance, you could kind of get everything cleaned up before the official vote so that when it gets to our stage, hopefully it's just approval with no extra conditions and can go through that consent process as opposed to the other way. So I would say, if you think there could be something that's more challenging, try to get it in before the vote. And I think, that's probably a good timeline. I think if it's really early in the process, it might just be meeting locally.
Too early.
With but just meeting with our staff.
Okay. All right. And is that something that obviously we work back and forth a lot, with those project reviews, something that staff would on your end say, okay, I think this is the appropriate time to, do your pre-application?
Yeah, I think so. We try our best to try to gauge that. Yeah.
Yep. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Stephanie and Nick. Any other questions for Nick and Charlotte? All right, I think we will move right along to our next agenda item. Thank you, Nick and Charlotte. And if anybody has any questions, do feel free to reach out to any one of us. I'll be providing some of the, we'll be providing this recording as well as the materials that we went over today for everybody. So you can always have that to refer back to. And so with that, I'm going to hand things over to Jen, who is going to, one of our planners with the Critical Area Commission. She is just going to briefly talk about our updated shore erosion control documents for joint permit applications with MDE. Okay, take it away, Jen.
Thanks, Katie. Hi, all. We've, I think, gotten a lot of information for a lot of changes coming down the pipeline soon. So hopefully I won't add to a little bit of overwhelming information and just provide a brief update of what will be coming down the pipeline. I think all of you are aware for shore erosion control projects, we have a section on our website. Hopefully you can see my screen. When you go to our website, and you click on the shore erosion control tab, we have some information as it relates to the overall process for what an applicant needs to go through to apply for a shore erosion control project. And over here, we have a lot of our quick links to forms. About, I don't know, 3 years ago, hopefully, Nick, I think I'm correct, maybe 4. I feel like when COVID happened, everything becomes like a blur tunnel of a timeline. But we vetted several forms through the local jurisdiction process and reach out to marine contractors and other stakeholders to get feedback on the goal at that time. And the goal of this new update is still to clarify what's required for when a person is submitting for a shore erosion control project through the joint permit application, or JPA for short. So when you're applying to MDE, a person has to apply for a joint permit application. And as a part of that package, in order for that package to be deemed complete, in order for MDE to issue an authorization, there are 2 critical area components that are required per COMAR currently. One is a signed buffer notification form, and one is a draft buffer management plan. And so we created these different forms for living shorelines, for bulkheads, for revetments, for when you're accessing the water and doing the work for offshore work only, to hopefully simplify the process, but also there was an opportunity to provide an increased mitigation flexibility there, especially for when someone was proposing a living shoreline, because the intent there was you're via the living shoreline and trying to really bolster and support the state's Living Shoreline Act goals, was to not, also ding heavily for mitigation for any tie-in or transitional areas to that living shoreline within the buffer. So those forms were vetted. They've been on our website now for quite some time. They have been used, but looking at the process, because we, as the critical area planner, receives the joint permit application, as it's named, joint permit application. Those applications get submitted to other reviewing agencies for comment within and during the MDEs, or potentially Board of Public Works review and permitting timeline. And then when we receive it, we review it and provide feedback. We also work with our local permitting, local jurisdictions, because you are the permitting authority. And so the overall, we had the forms updated, we've had it vetted, but what we've been seeing recently is that it's still not as clear as I think it can be. So we have been working to make these forms a little bit clearer, clarifying what is required. So when you're just doing a bulkhead or just doing offshore work only, it's like really a 1 to 2 page form. If that's completed with your buffer notification form and submitted as a part of the JPA, then that packet is deemed complete, and we probably will not even see it or provide comments in the near future. But when you have a revetment or a living shoreline, so we're talking bigger projects that potentially have more impacts within the critical area buffer, there is more information that is necessary, and that really includes a draft, an actual draft sketch, or an engineered plan that shows how the shoreline's being accessed, how the buffer is being impacted, and potential mitigation. So we have not really been seeing complete packets. So we are in the works, again, trying to simplify these forms that are up here on the right-hand side to really make it clear what is required. We're also trying to simplify the inputs for the users because we realize there's a lot of hands in the review pot. And the process itself is pretty complicated. So we really want to make sure that we are trying to make it easier for the applicants, for the users. And then if these forms are used, and we do encourage, I know that certain jurisdictions have their own processes for shore erosion controls and for buffer management plans in general, but specifically for shore erosion controls, if these forms are used, there is a lot of flexibility built in as it relates to mitigation. And some of that is, you know, what we've been seeing as it relates to climate change and other changes that are happening on the shoreline. Sometimes planting a filter strip behind a shore erosion control measure is better for filtering stormwater runoff and providing for potential opportunities for wetlands to migrate than just planting a tree randomly for mitigation. So we're kind of looking at that as well. And I think these forms can be altered and changed over time as potentially when we start working with the local jurisdictions on our law updates as it relates to climate resiliency. And another thing I just wanted to call out or point out is that we do meet with Maryland Department of Environment, Department of Natural Resources, Chesapeake and Coastal Services monthly. We call it our Batman meetings. We bring projects that are more impactful or topics that keep coming up, some issues that potentially local planners are seeing as it relates to, you know, the shoreline is very dynamic, and you've got MDE looking at one line in channelward, and you're permitting one line landward, and it's not always so clear cut and black and white as to this like mean high water line. So a lot of stuff goes on the shoreline. It's very dynamic. So I think the process as it relates to bigger projects and some topics that are reoccurring warrants the meeting of the minds. And so we meet monthly, the fourth Thursday of every month if there's projects or topics that warrant a meeting. But it's a hard scheduled date. It's 1 to 3, the fourth Thursday of the month. And the intent again is to hopefully get the review agencies on the same page, maybe not all the time, but at least on the same book. and we do invite the local jurisdictions when there is a project or topic that is really pertinent to those jurisdictions. But I do recognize that I think that the conversation piece, we all could benefit more for more local presence. So I would like to invite you all to be a part of the Batman meetings. We can send out an invite. We can send you the agendas as well. And, you know, if time allows, if there's topics or projects within your affected jurisdictions that you would like to be a part of those conversations, we definitely like to invite you to that. And we like to broaden the topics a little bit for Batman. You know, we have been seeing, especially on the lower eastern shore, a lot of lawns convert into wetlands, And, you know, how do we tackle the climate resiliency piece in the face of shore erosion control? So there's a lot of kind of unknowns and bigger topics that I think that we all can benefit from by having those conversations. And I think that's all I have. So if you have any questions on that, I'm happy to answer a few now, or you can email me any more specific questions. But I think to be continued. We will update you when those shore erosion control buffer management plan forms have been updated, and our website has been updated to reflect that. And to be continued of looking hopefully future for an invite to our Batman meetings.
Thank you, Jen. Any questions for Jen before we move on to our last major agenda item? Okay, thank you, Jen. All right, so I now would like to invite Dan Berman, Critical Area Planner with Harford County, to kick off our discussion question. This was a question that Dan and his group originally brought to our office that we thought would be a really great question to pose to all of you. So thank you for those who responded to the our Google form. If you didn't, we're going to have a discussion. Everybody can pitch in some ideas. The question is, what are counties doing to increase awareness of the critical area in an effort to reduce critical area violations? So before we get into that, Dan is going to present some examples that his county uses, and then we'll go from there. So Dan, I'm going to hand it off to you.
Thank you, Katie, for starting that discussion. Can everybody hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen. And like Katie said, this was a discussion that we had at a small meeting a couple months ago, and we decided to extend the question to everybody here. And it's good for us to talk about outreach and set up a clearinghouse. And I certainly hope I can get some good ideas out of it as well. I think the goal of outreach is to get the message out, but a side benefit is trying to instill and grow an environmental ethic in everybody we work with. I think we all enjoy that. Another benefit would be reducing violations. I don't know about you guys, but we have had a lot of violations recently, particularly trees getting cut down by people who just didn't know about the critical area, didn't know they were supposed to call us. At least, that's what they said. But a lot of people just didn't know anything about the critical area. And one of our goals moving forward is to do better with our outreach, get more ideas about how to get the word out. This is some of the stuff that Harford County is currently doing for outreach. We have brochures, we have letters, we do presentations, and we have a display board that we take to different events around the county. And we try to keep outreach very strategic, and we try to be enthusiastic as possible. Sometimes that means making sure that our outreach techniques include stuff that we're very passionate about, something like gardening or maps. This is our brochure. It's focused on shoreline living, shoreline erosion, minimizing impacts, and native plants. It's on our website, and there's printed copies available around our building. And we take this to all of our events as well. We try to get this in as many hands as possible. Just to spread awareness and make sure people know about the critical area. We also we have periodically sent out letters over the years. This is an example of one of our letters that we send out. It's one page. And it talks about how there should be no structures in the buffer, no vegetarian clearing limitations. We have 3 types of letters. This one in particular is sent out to people who have buffer on their property. And we haven't sent these out in a while because, obviously they cost a little bit of money. So that has to be counted in the budget. But you also have to be prepared for you have to have the staff and the time to accept an increase in calls and violations. Because once you get these letters, neighbors start turning on each other. In the short term, you do get some more violations. But we do have evidence that these letters do help decrease violations in the long run. We also have a presentation that we take around the county, and two of the main groups that we try to get this presentation to are HOAs and real estate associations. One presentation that we did recently to an HOA, I know has worked very well because there hasn't been any violations in this neighborhood for a few years now. And I even have an example where somebody called me and said, hey, I was about to put a patio in my backyard, but my neighbor came over and said I should call you first. And so we have since we did this presentation with the HOA knows about it, neighbors know about it, and most people know to call me before they do anything, especially in the buffer. And we're always looking for new ideas. Some other ideas that we've discussed in my department are signs. And I'd be very interested to hear from somebody who has done signs around the county, and if they think it's helped. I know there's a cost associated with that as well. And the other idea that we've discussed doing is plantings that involve the public. And if we can, using fee and lieu money, doing plantings and invite the public, have it also be an educational situation for them, could be a win-win for the whole county. And with that, I can stop sharing. And if anybody has any other ideas, but we'd love to hear about it.
Thank you, Dan. Sarah, go ahead.
Yeah, this is a more kind of scattershot approach, but using social media to just make the whole community aware of the situation. So you get more of the neighbor saying, hey, you got to call before you do that.
That's a great idea, actually. I didn't really, especially since like everyone's using social media these days. Oh, Claudia said, this is great, Dan. Glad you're doing all that educational outreach. And yes, I agree. I also, so we had one of our responses to the Google Forms said that they had a list, like they would give presentations to realtors and also surveyors, and they would have a mailing list of surveyors who they would like reach out if there were kind of any updates in their kind of critical area program or any sort of for any kind of educational outreach, which I thought was actually pretty great. Does anybody use signs in their like critical area signs, as Dan kind of showed? So I think that's a great idea. I'm curious. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, as you saw in his presentation, that's actually one of our signs, and those are used in along the boundary of critical area easements. But like the Lisa Simpson meme, those are signs, not a cop. So you know, it at least notifies people before they take the sign out and keep mowing.
That's good. That's good. Anybody else use signs or brochures? Stephanie, go ahead.
Yeah, we use signs to mark easements as well in Queen Anne's. So.
How about, has anybody done, like reached out or worked with like realtors? I thought that was kind of or presented with realtors as well. I thought that was an interesting thought. Maureen, go ahead.
Yeah, we don't use signs that I know of, but we do. I think they're doing it twice a year now, where they have a presentation, and all the realtors in the county are invited. And it's not just on critical area though; it's on all types of planning. It's like, I think it's like a 3-hour presentation that realtors can attend.
Wow. And that's regular? That's
They've done it. They did it in the fall. Well, no, they just did it recently. They had one in the fall. They just did it recently, and they're going to do it again in the fall. So I think we're doing it twice a year now.
okay. Wow, that's great. And is it a good turnout?
I think so. I wasn't at the last one, but I think they said they had about 30.
Wow, that's
So,
awesome.
yeah.
Oh, thank you. I saw Elisa has her hand up.
Yes, we have given presentations to the realtors during their continuing education program, and we also give Master Gardener program presentations as well. And we find that the Master Gardeners are very conscious of the critical area and spread the word very well.
That's actually great. And I feel like for the Master Gardeners too, it's they're probably also connected with like other groups potentially that could also be like involved in the effort as well. That's great. Tom, go ahead.
So yeah, we've held workshops with contractors and engineering firms. It kind of is a little bit of a dual-edged sword there, where potentially we can help get plans correct the first time, with limit the amount of comments coming back out of the county back to the engineers. And also when they are going out to do quotes and things like that, when they reach out to contractors can help advise people that are already not aware of what protected easements might be on their property and tree removal, everything of that nature, prior to them actually getting started on the work.
That's great. These are all great, great ideas and great examples. Does anybody else have anything that works in their? Oh, Nick, go ahead.
Yeah, Katie, I want to add, put this out there to the planners. In the past on our website, we used to have a section that was specifically to put up local resources that are used for outreach. And we could totally put that back up if people wanted to submit, maybe to you, Katie, maybe just to submit outreach resources, and we could put them up on a web page. Then that way any local jurisdiction could come to our page and see what like Hartford's doing, what Talbot's doing, and be able to get that information down. So we could put that together.
Yeah, and that way it's on the website and everybody can like see all the examples and be able to learn and use that within their programs. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Okay, so I'll probably be setting up an email and asking for folks to send some things our way so we could post it to our site. That's a great idea. I also know that there's some, I don't know if it's Calvert, but I know that there is one county that at least has like a YouTube series with just like some videos. One of them is like critical area buffer and like what is a critical area. And I thought that's like, it's really like kind of simple and easy to understand. And that could also be posted on social media. Yeah. Any other thoughts, ideas, examples? Oh, it was Calvert. Nick just posted the link. Stacy is wondering if anyone has thought about a story map for the critical area, like the Green Book for the Bay. Oh, okay, yeah, so I guess with Story Map is great because it's like you just kind of, it's very user friendly. You just kind of scroll through and it provides like just like a general understanding of whatever kind of topic you have, and you can incorporate multiple maps and things, and it's very just like linear as you kind of go down, and makes it sort of quick and easy. It's supposed to be very quick and easy to understand. That's just a good idea. Has anybody utilized story maps or any kind of interactive mapping? Well, that was a good idea. That's a good idea. So it's maybe something else we can think about. All right. Well, I think that wraps up our discussion. We'll follow up in an email. If you guys have any other ideas or thoughts or suggestions, also feel free to either reach out to contact Dan or myself, or you can fill out the Google form. We have 10 minutes left. So I'm just going to throw out also a very quick question while we're all here. A separate sort of idea. But we were wondering if any of you coordinate with tribes during your review of local projects. If you had to consider like any tribal resources or anything of that sort.
Yeah, and it might be like part of your archaeological kind of like historic. If I know some jurisdictions have archaeologists on staff, or they have at least someone they consult with on that in that regard. So even if you have someone like that you work with, that would be helpful to know also.
Cassie, go ahead. I don't think we can hear you, but you're not muted.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I know before I left Wacomico, they were doing Pirates Wharf Park, and part of that requirement, they had to do an archaeological dig. They didn't have anyone on staff, but I know there was a requirement of it's not specific to like critical area and their requirements for it, but I remember that being like a more timely part of it.
Awesome. Thank you, Cassie. Did they coordinate with MHT on that, do you think?
Not exact. I think they
Okay.
at minimum had to like
Hire like a
I know like a
consultant.
lot of times you have to get the like those letters like from Lori Byrne before you do any types of projects like these. But I think it was beyond like that, because I have a lot of well, we don't really have too many here in Dorchester. We just don't have like a ton of larger projects like that. Most of ours are more residential, but when they are larger projects, then you typically have to get a minimum like that letter from Lori Byrne. But I haven't run into anywhere we've had to do archaeological digs or anything like that.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else who's had to coordinate with tribes in the past for projects, or have had to consider tribal resources during their reviews? All right. I'm going to take silence as no. So we will move on. Thank you. Thank you so much, Dan, for providing some of your examples on that discussion question. Thank you, Nick and Charlotte and Kate and Lisa and Eric and Jen for helping run the meeting and presenting. And we'll be following up with an email with all of the materials presented during today's meeting, as well as the recording once I get it. And Nick, would you like to, is there anything I'm missing?
I think you got it covered, Katie.
Okay, excellent. All right. Well, with that, thank you all for attending today. And we will see you next time during next quarterly planners meeting.
Thanks everybody.
Everyone. Thank you.